The Battle of Charonea. In 338 BCE, one of the most significant battles in ancient history took place. This, of course, was the Battle of Charonea, the first major battle that Alexander the Great took part in. Now, this battle wasn't actually fought under the generalship of Alexander the Great, rather it was fought under the generalship of Philip the One-Eyed, his father, but he still played a major role as the head of the companion cavalry. So, we're going to see how significant that battle really was and the tactics that Philip the One-Eyed used. Philip's campaign. Macedonia in the 330s and the 4th century and 5th century BCE in general, compared to other Greek city-states, was a bit of a backwater. Athens and Sparta saw them as barbarians and likened them to the Thracians and the Molossians to their north, which, comparatively to the Macedonians, those people were barbarians, and that was proven in later military successes. But many great Macedonian kings were determined to prove the Greek snobs wrong and establish their dominance. The first of these kings was Perdiccas. Perdiccas, unlike Philip II or Philip the One-Eyed and Alexander the Great, was a Hellenophile, and he wished to become as like as the Greeks as possible, even though he himself was not Greek. He sent envoys to Athens and Thebes and all those great Greek cities, and he copied their government, he copied their culture, he copied their religion, and he built many buildings in the Greek style at his capital. But Perdiccas' Hellenophilism, really didn't work out to his advantage, even though it brought great many reforms to Macedonia, such as the first minting of a Macedonian coin, and also advancements in Macedonian architecture. But compared to Philip II, he really was quite insignificant in the history of Macedonia. Philip II was not a Hellenophile. He resented the Greeks as much as he did the Persians, and instead wanted to become their master, their overlord, their hegemon. And he wished to control all of the Greek states in a league, which is a political alliance, and then later invade the Persian Empire. Well, he did this in a number of ways. First of all, he married Olympias, who was the queen of Epirus, which was a Greek kingdom in modern-day Albania. This would later prove to be a bit of a political nightmare, because Olympias, of course, was the mother of Alexander the Great, and in the War of the Diadochs, which is the War of the Successors, many argued that Alexander the Great's son could not be a true leader, or Alexander the Great never had the right to the throne because he was not a true Macedonian, unlike many noblemen. But I digress. And so he married Olympias of Epirus, who was a great queen and proved very volatile later on. But he also conquered regions of Thrace, which is in modern-day Bulgaria. He didn't outright conquer Greece at first, and his first campaigns were the ones in Thrace, because he wanted to show off his military prowess in case he ever had to invade Greece, which of course he later had to do. But after the Thracian campaign, he had many battle scars, but he was still determined to become the hegemon of Greece, and so he moved his troops into Boeotia in central Greece and prepared to take on the Thebans and the Athenians at the Battle of Charonea. At his side was the teenaged Alexander, who was his prince, I guess his successor. And, of course, as you'll learn soon, they absolutely destroyed and allied Theban and Athenian force and became the hegemons of Greece. The strategy. Alright. In the summer of 338 BCE, as Philip II, or Philip the One-Eyed's troops thundered across central Greece towards the powerhouses of Thebes and Athens, the Thebans and Athenians obviously got pretty worried. And so they got together, and though historically, like Athens and Sparta, they were enemies, they agreed to come together, and the Athenians offered their militia to the Thebans to use, and the Thebans had their famous sacred band, and they took a stand outside the village of Charonea. which they didn't expect Philip II to actually get to because they thought that he would get distracted by the cities north of Thebes, but he just rolled right through there. So, on August 2nd, 338 BCE, Philip met the Athenians and the Thebans at Charonea, and he had roughly 2,000 companion cavalrymen under Alexander the Great. This is what the cavalry would be represented by. And he also had around 30,000 infantrymen in a phalanx formation with 13-foot long sarissai, which are pikes. And that's what this is represented by. On the Theban and Athenian side, they had a couple thousand cavalrymen. That's what this is represented by. And then a huge infantry force of around 33,000. So Philip was slightly outnumbered. Despite that, according to certain historians, he managed to outmaneuver them. By feigning a retreat with his infantrymen. This panicked the Athenian infantrymen, who quickly took chase because they were inexperienced. This is a citizen army, whereas Philip's Macedonian soldiers were a professional army at this point. And so, as the Athenians broke rank with the Thebans, that left the Thebans wholly exposed, and allowed for Alexander, with his measly 2,000 cavalrymen, to swoop in and hit the Athenians in their rear. This tactic is called the hammer and anvil tactic. It's called that because basically you're using your cavalry as a hammer, and you are taking that and you're smashing it against a brick of steel to force the enemy army to take the form that you want them. Usually that's a weakened and beleaguered state, or it's just that army is completely dead, which is ideal. And so Philip, of course, used this hammer and anvil tactic with the help of his son, Alexander, and wiped out the Athenians. This left the Thebans exposed. They didn't have a right wing at all anymore at this point. And so the Sacred Band, which was a troop made up of 300 soldiers, and was undefeated at that point. That's what this will represent. They were the only Thebans to really stand at the end of it, and all 300 of them died. Recently, there has been a discovery around the modern-day village of Charonea, or however it's pronounced, which is, of course, modern-day Charonea, and they have found the skulls of 254 soldiers buried in pairs. Historians believe that this is the Sacred Band because a little-known fact about the Sacred Band is it was a 300-troop unit made up of two pairs of lovers. And the idea behind that is the Thebans thought that the love for one another on the battlefield would make the men fight more mercilessly. Which, I'm not sure if that's true, but they were certainly a ferocious fighting force. After the Battle of Charonea, the city of Thebes was handed over to the Macedonians, and the Macedonians basically decided to just let the neighboring cities that had been oppressed by Thebes for so long have their way with the city. And so, in 338 BCE, the city was practically destroyed, and many thousands of its women were raped. And there was rampant murder and thievery and whatnot. But the result was an overwhelming Macedonian victory, and it established the Macedonians and Philip II as the hegemons of Greece, and allowed Philip II's son to later focus on the Persian Empire because he had that ego boost and that, demonstration of military prowess. So, Battle of Charonea overall, very influential. In conclusion, after the Battle of Charonea, around 20,000 and 25,000 Thebans and Athenians lay dead on the battlefield, and historians aren't exactly sure how many Macedonians died, but you can assume that it was probably in a couple thousands range. because they did feign retreat, and while that is a fantastic military tactic and usually works, it does cost you quite a few thousand men in ancient battle. Um, but overall, Battle of Charonea was an overwhelming Macedonian victory and established them as the leaders of all of Greece. Sparta, like I said before, really was an insignificant kingdom, uh, just due to the fact that it was a mountainous territory that would be pointless to invade. And so Philip was the hegemon of Greece, as he had dreamt, and immediately became clear that he had to do something with the city of Charonea and the city of Thebes, and because they were so cruel to him and their defense of their homeland, he decided that he would hand over the fate of Thebes to their neighboring cities. And the neighboring cities had a decision whether they would leave it alone or whether they would rape it and destroy it. And of course, because they had been oppressed by Thebes for so long, they chose to destroy it. And so they tore down the walls of the city, they tore down buildings, they murdered people, they stole everything there was to steal, including people. They murdered everyone, like I said before. They raped tons and tons of women, and it was just an all-out riot. But, it worked out for Philip because it showed other cities not to stand up to him because he was a cruel and vicious man, although he was still a man to be respected. And the conquest of Thebes and Athens left only one other superpower in Philip's eyes, and that was the Achaemenid Persian Empire. But of course, he would die before he would be able to campaign. In fact, he only died a couple months before his first campaign in Asia was set to begin, and his son Alexander III, or Alexander the Great, would take up that mantle. But overall, the Battle of Charonea, which took place on August 2nd, 338 BCE, was a very influential battle, mostly just for the fact that it established the Macedonians as a ferocious fighting force, not so much because of the tactics employed or the amount of life lost, but still very important.